And guess what, gang? It is time once again for your favorite show, our favorite show. We hope that it's your favorite show. It's Garden America. It is the weekend, and we are back in studio from San Diego, California. iHeartMedia and Entertainment. We are the entertainment branch of iHeartMedia. At least I think so. Tiger Palafox, John Begnasco. I'm Brian Main. John is here today. John looks great, Tiger. I've never seen somebody this early in the morning look so good.
Glowing.
He's glowing.
Just glowing.
Just like his reviews, right? Glowing reviews.
Exactly.
806.
Hi, John.
You know what 806 is?
Time?
806 is...
When you say it's time again.
Oh, it's 806 if it's live, if you're watching us live.
Right.
We just want to clear that up because a lot of people listen to the show after the fact.
It goes in our saying, what are they talking about?
Yeah, what do you mean? It's 12:30 in the morning or it's noon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have
So
a lot of people say, what are they talking about?
all the
if
time.
you are listening at a different
Isn't this
time,
a radio show? Is this
just
a gardening show?
figure it out. We are happy to be back. We're going to be talking roses today later on in the show with our guest. And it's going to be interesting, a different twist on roses, I think, to a degree, right?
I don't know. I mean, a different twist on roses.
Meaning
we're
not just-
talking about the plants, the
Right.
flowers,
But
the
it's got a-
varieties.
It's got a California twist.
It's got a California twist, yes.
See, I do my homework.
Yeah, we won't be talking international twist so much on roses.
No,
right?
California twist. And
Very-
then when we get to the quote of the week, I have a question or two for John because the quote seemed a little, at least the way I read it, awkward.
Yeah.
There something about the first sentence that John's going to explain. It didn't make sense to me.
You
You
know,
know what else didn't make sense was in the newsletter. I think I put the wrong name for one of the pictures that people sent in.
Oh, okay. So like somebody took the photo, but you put the wrong name for whoever did it?
Either that or the wrong name for the photo.
I thought that was your new feature in the newsletter
Yes.
called Guess Right or Wrong.
Find
Yeah.
the mistake.
Yeah, find the mistake. So the quote this week is by Julie Andrews.
Yeah,
And
now,
it,
she was a little bit before my time, but she seemed like the nicest lady.
well, you know what's funny about that?
Yeah.
Yes, but behind the
She knew
scenes,
her vocabulary.
she had a mouth.
Yeah, she had.
Really?
knew
Mary, you're talking about Mary Poppins.
Right, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like I know
every
who she
four-letter
is. and-
word
Yep.
that you could think of.
Really? So
She was married to Blake Edwards, who was a producer, director, made movies, did a lot in the industry. And I was a kid introduced to her, Sound of Music, Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
But yeah, John is right. She could
No, but
she
was
could
she
hang out with
mean?
sailors.
But was she mean, or she just knew those? She just would say those words.
I think she was just a very strong woman in a man's
I don't
world.
think she was mean.
Okay.
Was she?
I don't think so. I never heard that she was mean.
Yeah.
Just
Victor Victoria. Do you remember that?
yes. Now, didn't Blake Edwards? Didn't he produce 10
Yes.
with Bo Derek? Yes. And the little guy, God, I forget his name. The actor played in Arthur too. Dudley Moore.
Oh,
Dudley Moore. John was thinking Dudley Do-Right.
A lot of Dudleys.
Man, you see how we go, how the twists and turns of
Well,
this show.
when John sets it up with a famous person quote, and especially Julie Andrews, who, where are we going to go with that? But
well, we
it's a
might
good
as well
quote.
do the quote if we're
Yeah,
talking
exactly.
about it.
Okay, so go ahead and read it, and then I'll tell you where and maybe if he reads it, it'll make sense.
Hey, and will you do me a favor and add in some of her curse words, as if she was really saying it?
All right. I love to prune my blanken roses. That's the one thing I really feel I do pretty well. Other things I usually, because I travel so much, leave to my gardeners who know what I love.
Go back. Other things what? Start there.
Other things like in the garden,
Yeah.
I usually, because I travel so much,
I
leave to my
usually
gardeners.
what?
What do you mean?
I usually leave to my gardeners.
Read it again, because I
It
said
makes
maybe
sense.
I was disconnected when I read it because maybe it was the punctuation in there.
Other things I usually, because I travel so much, leave to my gardeners.
Other things I usually
Are
what?
you having trouble with that?
I am not.
Yeah, me neither.
Other
I
things.
mean, it does sound a little bit off.
okay.
I get what you're saying, but I got it. I get the point.
But usually quotes are a little more eloquent than that.
No way. When is a quote ever eloquent?
I
It's
guess
usually
I could just,
somebody stumbling through something.
I just don't like the quote. I guess I just don't like
You know
it.
what?
I do like
Not because
I do like John's adage to it though. What was
Yeah,
it?
that
I
made
love
it.
to trim my blinking roses.
that
I'm gonna
was
start,
funny.
Let's start over and do it properly.
Okay.
And give her her due. I love to prune my roses. That's the one thing I really feel I do pretty well. Other things I usually, because I travel so much, leave to my gardeners who know what I love. But I do love to prune them because you forget everything else. It's like if you're a painter, you can forget everything else while you're doing it.
Yeah.
She could have stopped before the painter reference. All right.
So
I thought it was a nice quote because one of your favorite quotes was from George Harrison talking about how he was really a gardener.
Well, he said, I'm really a gardener. I just happen to play in a band, and if you're going to play in a band, it might as well be the Beatles.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's too bad, because if he was still alive, I'm sure we could have got him on the show. Because he was that kind of guy. Because he would rather talk about that than do an interview on the Beatles.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was that kind of guy for sure.
When we had our mail order store, we sent an order to Colorado to, who is the singer? I'm trying to think. Joe Cocker. We got an order from Joe Cocker. Do you remember
when
that?
was this? It sounds familiar.
Yeah, when we had our mail order store.
Mhm.
He had a farm in Colorado.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool. There's a lot of that is the thing about gardening, is that it is a hobby for a lot of people and they really enjoy it. And just because you're famous and have money or you're powerful, it still grounds you, in the sense of you get out there, you start to pull weeds, you start to trim something, you want to plant something new. You can have a gardener.
Everyone starts even.
Yeah, well,
Like you're saying.
But you can have a gardener do it for you, but it's still not the same joy that you get out of it when you go out there. So you always like to add your little bit of what you do.
It's like there's a lot of things that you like to do in the garden.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a gardener, then maybe they can take care of what you don't want to deal with.
Yeah, and that's the way I approach our landscape company is, I talk to people and get what they want out of us. And it's kind of like, well, we want to make sure we're doing everything that you just don't want to do.
Yes,
So when you
exactly.
come out here, you can just enjoy what you're doing and you can choose and do what you want to do, not because you feel you have to do it.
I wish I could get someone to do whatever it is I don't want to
Yeah, exactly.
But there is always that aspect of gardening that I have to do this, but I'd rather do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend a lot of time doing this.
Yeah.
do. Are we going to skip over the personal questions?
No, go ahead.
All right. It's a personal question from Diane.
All right.
Diana. She says, "Morning, Brian. Where were you last night?" I don't know if Dana's listening.
Oh, Dana knows Diane. Dana knows. I used to date her before Dana.
Oh.
There was a pre-party for the reunion, like what do you call it, a warm-up the night before,
For all your old
like a little
girlfriends?
mixer.
What?
You have your reunion tonight?
Tonight.
High school reunion?
High school reunion.
50?
Wow.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
And you didn't go? You didn't go to the pre-party?
Nah, I'd rather wait and do the big one.
Yeah. Save it all for this.
Yeah, I think, what did I do last? I got home late last night anyway. So I think that's what that was referring to.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it says, "Good morning, Brian and Kevin. It's Diana this time." So her friend Annette is with her, and they're sharing Facebook.
Hey, Carla says that she saw Julie Andrews in person,
Oh.
and she thought she was one of the most beautiful women she'd ever seen. She said, peaches and cream, flawless complexion, and comported herself so elegantly.
See, that's my vision of her.
And it should be.
No, and it should
We're
be.
not gonna ruin
but
it.
You know what? No. But the fact that she could hang out, it sounds like she could hang out with the guys and keep her own, is even
And still be
even better than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
But you know what? I think even if you're cussing with a British accent, it
It's
sounds
okay.
elegant.
It's a little different, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's acceptable.
Yeah.
That didn't sound so bad.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I
when
just got
he said it, it was
insulted, but
terrible.
I feel good about myself.
Okay, we're coming up on just about a minute to go until the first segment is over. We're going to get our guest on, Paul
Zimmerman.
Zimmerman with a different twist on roses, a California
working on a
twist.
real neat project.
By the way,
Tell you all
Brian,
about
did
it.
you look at the photos in the newsletter for what's growing in our garden?
Okay.
I found the photo.
Where did you find that picture?
I found it in my computer.
Because I got to tell you, it doesn't look like that now.
No, I know, but that we had talked about it the week before, so I thought I'd put it in the newsletter.
That was perfect because now it's like, oh yeah, this is what it looked like brand new. There's a few stragglers, John, left that are still doing well, some of the succulents.
Of the radio succulent?
But you saw that right in the newsletter?
Yeah.
Yeah, good picture. Thank you for that. That was 10 years ago,
Well,
that
what's
picture.
the name of the plant that you had in there?
The one that I asked you
Yes.
about outside.
What's the name of it?
I forgot already.
Oh, it's such an easy one. Burrow's tail.
I'll never forget that. Burrow's tail.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's break time. We're going to get a hold of our guest. Our guest going to be
Paul
talking
Zimmerman.
about roses. Paul Zimmerman with the California Twist. Stay with us. Good to have you aboard. I'm Brian Main, John Bagnasco, Tiger Palafox. Thank you for tuning in to Garden America. Back after these messages on Biz Talk Radio. All righty, we are back from the break. Those on Biz Talk Radio, thank you for tuning in this morning or tuning in after the fact, or whatever the case may be, because if you are listening on Biz Talk Radio, this is last week's show. To bring you up to date, I'm going to toss to Tiger. Going to be talking roses. We've got our guest, Paul Zimmerman, standing by with a California twist. Here we go, Tiger.
Yeah, we have a brand new guest joining us this morning. Paul Zimmerman's going to be talking with us about a really neat project he's working on that involves some roses here in California. But first off, Paul, I want to just thank you for joining the program. I understand you've had a pretty interesting week, and we're lucky to have you. So we're glad you're safe and sound right now, and it seems like things are going better for you. But you're in North Carolina, correct?
Actually, I'm in South Carolina, but on the South Carolina-North Carolina border.
Okay. And
western part of the state.
And you guys were you were hit pretty hard by the storm recently, right?
Yeah, Helena really, the eye was about 30 miles west of us, maybe 40. Lots of wind, trees down. We were without power for a while, even though that's back on now. We got internet, cell phone. We were without cell phone, which is an odd thing in this day and age to not have, internet or cell phone or absolutely no way of contacting the outside world, because we had no idea how bad it had hit North Carolina, which really took the brunt of this thing.
Yeah.
Until, Monday or Tuesday when we were able to get online and start to see just how bad it had been. But we consider ourselves fortunate. We were inconvenienced, but we still have a house, we still have a place to live, and we had food and we had water. And so compared to what other people are going through, we didn't go through much.
Yeah, and you guys, I was talking with Paul earlier this week, and he was saying he moved from Florida. So some of his Florida roots as far as storm prep came out in preparation for the storm that was coming. And I was just
kicked in. Yeah, I knew it was coming, and I saw it was going to be bad. So make sure all the cars are full of gas. Make sure we got plenty of ice. Make sure the bathtub is filled with water. So you can flush a toilet. With that kind of, because we're on a well. We're not on city water here. So little things like that just sort of kicked in pretty automatically. But we we came through it all right. It's the folks up in North Carolina, particularly in the mountains up there, that really need help. They really took a blow, and of course nobody up there has flood insurance. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just commenting to Paul, I would have no clue. Being from San Diego,
what do we do?
Storm prep, I'd be like, I got some groceries in the cupboard, and what do you mean I need water? I would be so in trouble.
Well, Paul, when you said the various things you did to prepare, and you said the bathtub is full, and then you prefaced it by saying with water, I thought you were talking about moonshine.
Yeah.
Oh,
that would have been good in case we got hurt. Good disinfectant.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Paul, you're working on a really neat project for us here in California. That we want to kind of tell our listeners about, because it's coming up quick as far as the actual project breaking ground and when it should be open. So tell us a little bit about this wonderful California rose garden you're working on creating.
Yeah, it's the city of Fremont, California, and it's the site of the old historic California nursery, which has been around. Well, it's not there anymore, but it was around the late 1800s into early 1900s. And the California nursery was very instrumental in bringing a lot of roses to California. At the time, old garden roses that would have existed, 1860, 70, 80, 1890, that area, old Q roses and things like that. And so it's now a historical park. It's called the California Nursery Historical Park, the city of Fremont. And they decided to put a rose garden into it. And they have a landscape architect works for the city. His name is Andrew, who did a really nice design of a garden. And so then they were starting to say, okay, what roses are going to go in this? And they got a hold of me. I do this is what I do, consulting and design and stuff like that. And so he reached out to me, and we were chatting, and he had a sort of a preliminary list of roses, and there were some very, very nice roses, but nothing that to me felt like a California bend to it. So I suggested to him, I said, would you be interested in doing something that's more California-centric that talks about the history of roses in California, which is, it's a 150-year history, very illustrative history in terms of not only bringing roses in from Europe, but also all the rose breeders that lived in California through Jackson Perkins and Weeks and all of those places. And he said, yeah, we would love to. We weren't sure where to begin. And I said, well, let's go. That's not going to be an issue. We can figure this out.
Yeah.
I know an awful lot of people. I talked to John, as a matter of fact, about this. I talked to a lot of other people. I spoke to Greg Lowry from Friends of Vintage Roses, Tom Caruth, who was head of hybridizing at Weeks Roses, and now is the curator of the Huntington Botanical Garden, just people I've known. And we're putting together this list that will start with roses from the late 1800s up till modern, and it's sort of a walk through the snapshot of time of the history of roses in California.
Yeah, and what a neat way to honor that history is to actually have the plants there. People can kind of see them, touch them, smell them, feel them, and tell the story, because these aren't all just roses that necessarily people are going to know, but some of them they will, obviously, but at the same time they influenced what roses are today for us, because as you mentioned, some of the names right now, California was a lot of the headquarters for a lot of the major rose companies, right?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, Weeks Roses is still there. Star Roses does quite a bit of business in California. Jim Sproul, who's a rose breeder, that he breeds for Star Roses. And then, of course, you go through Jackson Perkins, you've got, William Warner and Keith Sari, and then, Weeks, you've got Tom Caruth and Jack Christensen and Christian Bedard. And the nice thing is several of these, like Tom Caruth is obviously still alive, as is Christian Bedard and Jim Sproul and quite a few, and Keith Sari. And I've spoken to all of them, and what I'm having them do, since they're still with us, I say, I want you to pick the roses that represent you, what represents your career. And we're also going to have some signage. I've asked them to write a short little paragraph about what their roses and what they picked in their breeding program. And the city wants to put signs and displays to talk about that as well. So it's been kind of neat to get input from, the breeders themselves. And who's better to pick roses that represent their career than the breeders themselves?
Yeah, and what a neat thing to do also, because, normally when you go into a rose garden, it has the rose, has the name of it, maybe a little bit of the parentage or something like that. But, it's really neat that you guys are actually going to include a little bit of history as far as maybe why the breeder picked that one, or maybe a fun little tidbit of information about it, or, the time frame of when it was popular. Just give you a little bit more insight, because, we go to rose gardens all the time, and, you just see the name and you're like, oh, that's a cool looking rose. And, I like that. But to actually kind of learn a little bit about why or what or how is pretty neat too. Now, how many roses are going to go in this garden?
It's probably going to be, in terms of the quantity of plants, about 450 plants, but I'll do them in groups of 3 of each variety just to make it more of an impact. A garden of one rose gets kind of boring after a while, because you want something visually charming as well. So you're looking probably about 150 varieties by the time we're done. And it runs the gambit. It's early roses. I've done some research, and there's 4 roses that were bred in the late 1800 that are still around. Rainbow, Climbing Cecil Brunner, Santa Rosa, and Burbank, that I can still get, plants and material of. And we're also not necessarily limiting ourselves to roses that are widely in commerce. I'm working with a wonderful company in L.A. called Otto & Sons, Scott, and the material, the roses of whatever size cuttings, will go to Otto & Sons. They will can them up in larger pots, root the cuttings if they need to. We might have to have some stuff custom budded. So that's going to allow us, and Otto & Sons will grow them on to the size where they can then be planted in the garden itself. Otto & Sons is very good at this. And so that allows us to open up the door to, a whole lot more roses than if we just had to go with what's in commerce right
available.
now.
Hey, Paul, we're going to have to take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll continue chatting with Paul Zimmerman about the California rose garden that he's creating.
Yep, and those on Facebook Live, keep the questions, comments coming for Paul. We'll take a break here for Biz Talk Radio. Back with Paul Zimmerman. Welcome to Garden America. Happy weekend to you. Brian Main, John Begnasco, Tiger Palafox here on Garden America. Stay with us. All righty, we are back from the break. Thank you for joining us, those on Biz Talk Radio, those on Facebook Live, any first-time viewers or listeners, we appreciate it. Garden America right here every Saturday live, 8 a.m. on the West Coast, 11 o'clock Eastern Time Zone. Today, talking about roses, Paul Zimmerman is our guest as we continue, Tiger.
Yeah, Paul, when you were talking about this rose garden that you guys are creating to help preserve some of the history with California roses, and you had mentioned you're going to be planting in groups. You're going to have about 400, 450 roses. You're going to be planting in groups of 3 just because of the aesthetics. I saw a little twitch over on my left side come from John because, it's funny. He has no problem having 450 different varieties of roses because he feels you're probably wasting space. But it's funny because his daughter, Gina, comes into town, and she's a very aesthetic person. And so when he's planting his garden, when he's putting new plants, whether they are roses or other plants, Gina helps lay them out into color schemes and what plants complement each other and all of that. And so I think it's just so funny because, John would have no problem walking into a garden that had one of each specific rose just in the garden to preserve them and everything like that. But yeah. I like that you're approaching it a little bit more aesthetically, Paul.
But the reason, let's tell the truth here. When I go into a rose garden, I often don't even look at the flowers.
Yeah.
I'd look at tags.
Yeah.
And then if the tag interests me, then I'll look at the flowers.
And you don't look at the garden as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, you're not like stepping back and being like, wow.
No, it's all individual.
Yeah, look at the paths. Look at how the rocks complement it. Right. Oh, that tree there,
But if I'll tell you, if I was setting up a garden, I would do it exactly the way Paul's doing it. 3 of each variety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's gophers to begin with.
Yeah.
Paul, I wanted to ask you, we were talking before the show started, and I think California Nursery was the one, and I could be totally wrong here, but I think they were the ones who introduced Golden State, which was a rose that Mayon produced in France and then introduced through Conard Pyle here. Does that sound familiar to you, Paul?
Across that variety yet. I haven't gone quite into what the California Nursery carried. I'm actually talking to some folks who volunteer in with at this site, and they actually apparently have some stronger history of what the California Nursery carried.
I know there's some historical photos of from the 40s, I believe. It was introduced in either late 30s, early 40s or something like that.
Yeah, and that's one we would certainly put in. I mean, that qualifies. We're not looking for just California breeders. I mean, and we're not limiting it to the breeders that I've got. Right. A rose like what you just mentioned, John, that would have some historical significance for California. We'll probably do some of the old garden roses, too, just because the California Nursery was very instrumental in introducing those to the United States. They came in mostly from France, of course. But so that's kind of what we're mixing it up a little bit. So really early, just in the I've got a spreadsheet now of almost like 95 varieties or something like that. But, just tracking it all down. But, yeah, that's the kind of thing we're looking for.
I want to just quickly mention, Tiger, before you go on, too, because, I have a library at my house, and I collect books, especially rose books. But books are always more valuable if you can get an autographed copy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Paul wrote a book.
Doesn't matter whose autograph.
Paul wrote a book called Everyday Roses.
Oh, you did, Paul?
And if you go to his website, rarely do you see this, but you can order an autographed copy, and it's less than $1,000, right, Paul?
Oh, yeah, just a little bit less, not much, but you can go to the website. It's just paulzimmermanroses.com, and that's sort of the hub of a lot of things that I do. I do designing and consulting. You can reach me that way. I do garden tours. You can reach me. All that information is on the website. But you can order a copy of the book, and I'll sign it to you if I don't see anything else. But if you want it signed to someone else, there's a spot in there where you can say, I want it signed to, or I want to happy birthday, so whatever you want to put in there. Sign it, and we'll ship it out.
And I think it's only around $25 or something like that.
Yeah, it's the book is $22, and then it's $10 priority mail shipping. So I think it's like $33 altogether with priority mail shipping.
Yeah, what a
Yeah,
great
fun
gift
book.
idea.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
a great
Yeah.
gift. Yeah. I was going to ask you, Paul. This project is part of a bigger, like you said, it's a property that is now a park. There's other garden aspects to it. Who's going to be maintaining this down the road? Are you guys? Is it going to be a volunteer thing? Does the land have a preservation group? What's going to be going on for the future of it?
Yeah, what they've had volunteers from local rose societies to come in and volunteer. And what they're actually going to do now is they're going to take some of that and make it paid positions. So one of the things I'm writing is care protocols for them just to sort of a calendar out so they can kind of estimate how many hours they're looking at. They've got professional crews who can do some of the stuff, but the rose stuff itself specifically is going to be done by paid volunteers, for lack of a better word, who have a lot of rose knowledge.
Okay. And again, kind of what you just went back to as far as your background on this, that people know, with a lot of your consulting work, this is one of the things that you do is you come into, public gardens, private gardens, and kind of put a calendar together for people on how to preserve them well, fertilizer schedules, pest management, all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I do. There's a couple of different hats that I wear. One is just flat out garden design. That's either public or private, and I do that even virtually, remotely.
Mm-hmm.
I've designed gardens across the country that I've never seen. I've never actually set foot in. But the other thing I do, and I'm doing it with Chapel Hill as well, and I did it with Biltmore Estate, is my specialty with roses is sustainable growing. So as little chemical as possible, beneficial insects, soil health. And a lot of public gardens are, I think, correctly under pressure to stop spraying chemicals, particularly pesticides, because a lot of these are located in parks where people visit. They come in with their kids and things along those lines. And so one of the things I'm doing, like with Chapel Hill, with the Stroud Rose Garden there, is literally taking them from a chemical care regime to a sustainable care regime. And it's a process. It's about a 2-year process, because you've got to start by figuring out what roses can handle it, because not all roses can handle it. And then it's just a matter of slowly but surely building up what they need in order to exist without a lot of chemical intervention.
Wow. And
yeah.
So, starting from the ground up, like this project, it's kind of a great opportunity for them to start you're not having to correct anything. You're coming in and you're going to say, hey, here's what we need to do to get this started from day one. Have you noticed that it's easier to start that way, or is it easier to correct an issue because maybe it's just easier to introduce things later on?
It's actually easier to start from scratch, and
okay.
the main reason why is, first of all, if you have a blank slate, you can really work on the soil, which is the key to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a living soil profile, is what I call it, with mycorrhizae and all kinds of other words. But that's the nice thing to start with. The other thing. And this is where you also have to understand where you're going and where this garden is going. So, for example, with Chapel Hill, it's a collection of roses. It's going to be a lot of newer roses, new genetics, which tend to be very disease resistant and much better health-wise. So it's going to make it easier to do it. Now we're going to end up taking out a bunch of roses. So that's why it would have been easier to go from scratch, because I could design the garden based around roses that I felt would do well. So back over to the Fremont Garden, the California Historical Nursery Park Garden, that's going to be a little different, because we're going with historical roses and that are not being selected because they're disease resistant. So there's a different situation there.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of organic and fungicides and stuff that are rated more organically and less hazard-wise, but we're going to have to make sure those are in that regime, because some of these roses are going to get black spot and powdery mildew. It's just inevitable because of the way, in the time period that they were bred and their older genetics. So I have to always kind of balance what's the garden, what's the goal, what do we want to do? Like when I worked with Biltmore, since Biltmore's a living estate, there was no pressure to have that garden remain the way it was when it was first planted in the early 1900s. Oh. They were said, no, we can revolve. We want to, Olmsted and George Vanderbilt would have wanted new genetics brought into the garden, which is what we did over time. So you have to kind of know where you're going. But ideally, yes, starting from scratch is much, much easier, because you can pick the roses specifically for what you're doing.
It makes a lot of sense. Well, if you are looking for a an organic gopher controller, John, I'm sure would love to come out.
Yeah, right.
He works wonders with that gopher hawk, and
Yeah.
you
I
know,
tell you what, if you would gopher for voles and gophers, Jack Russell Terriers.
yeah. Hey, we're gonna have to take it.
I am not kidding, man. We had our dog Bonnie. She passed away a number of years ago, but when she was on the property, I didn't have a vole on this property.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it's good. Little terrier dog out there.
That's what you need, John.
Hey, we're going to have to take another break, Paul. When we get back, we'll continue chatting with Paul Zimmerman about some of the projects he's working on.
It is Garden America, and again, as Tiger mentioned, coming right back with Paul Zimmerman. Questions, comments, right there on our Facebook page. We're going to take a break for our good friends on Biz Talk Radio, Brian Main, John Begnasco, Tiger Palafox. Thank you for tuning in to America's #1 listened-to garden show as of last week. We are Garden America. Okay, back from the break, and a reminder for the folks on Biz Talk Radio, this is the final segment of hour number 1. We do our best to give you 2 hours. Hopefully, you'll carry our show or can tune into our show, hour 2, 6 minutes after the hour. But again, news coming up for those on Biz Talk Radio as we have returned. John, you got a question or two you want to address?
Yeah, we got a lot of listeners today. We had people listening from Johannesburg in South Africa, people, our buddy Hastam from Pakistan. But this one comes from Idaho, Paul. Mm-hmm. And Rick wants to know, because you've been mentioning all the breeders that you've been working with, and he was wondering, when you develop a new rose, do the breeders have a specific goal in mind, like weather adaptability, disease resistance, or is it all luck?
Great question, Rick. It's a little bit of both, actually. The breeders that I've worked with over the years and the ones that I really like are the ones that do have a focus. They know where they want to get to. And what they do find is they find that you cross 2 roses. This is pollination is essentially what you're doing, but you're doing it manually by hand. And they make these crosses with an idea of it's going to be fragrance, or in the case of David Austin, I want an old rose look with modern repeatability. Griffith Buck was cold hardiness. So they're going for something very specific goal in mind. It could be a color or something along those lines. And now the crosses are going to be random because there's so many genetics in the back of the rose that you don't really know what you're going to get. But what they do begin to find is that certain roses will throw a dominant characteristic, be it fragrance, disease resistance, certain kind of foliage, and they may not release that rose. It may just always have a number, but it's part of their breeding program. So it takes years, it takes a long time, but the good breeders do have a focus and they know where they want to go. That being said, you're going to cross, 10, 15,000 roses, and you might only get 2 or 3 good ones out of it by the time you're all said and done, just because there's so much random. It's like the redheaded child in a family of everybody with black hair. You don't know what. It goes back generations.
Yeah, how true.
Yeah.
I'm reading some of these questions, Paul, but
yeah, we're trying to keep up on all the questions.
And Kevin and I don't think Paul can answer this question, but it's an interesting question that got my attention. And,
I saw that. I'm curious too.
What roses do they adorn the winners of the Kentucky Derby with for the rose? And I just looked it up. I don't know if you know this at all, Paul, but it's a red rose, and
right.
they create this wreath. I'm trying to find if there's any kind of information as far as
like what kind of rose?
Is there a specific rose?
Probably a red florist rose would be my guess.
Yeah, I think you're
from a florist
right.
shop,
exactly.
And those usually are not available commercially. But I don't know. It's a red. It's a red. Looks like a hybrid tea generally. What they look like. So,
but we've all seen it. So we
exactly.
can identify.
Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, and
Thank you, Kevin.
And then there was another. I like that Gina. Said she loves the idea of this, and I think it was the fact that Paul's putting it together as a garden. I think
she likes that.
I think she really likes the idea there, John, that it's actually,
I think she likes that there's three of each instead of one.
And he's working on putting some thought together.
Gina has really good taste.
Yeah, exactly.
She gets it from her mother.
Yeah. And then, Sherry had mentioned that her Jack Russell Terriers used to tag team getting gophers, and I didn't realize Jack Russell Terriers were pack hunters. They worked together. And
Oh yeah, they're ferocious.
You don't know how much I'm thinking of getting one right now.
yeah, I'm sure. I mean, with the advice of Paul and then
Yeah.
Sherry saying
We'll
that they
take
used
care
to.
of it. I tell you.
And you can-
they're not. They're not big. They're like 14, 15 pounds, 12 pounds. They're not huge dogs. But my gosh, they think they're 150 pounds. But,
And then when you're out in the garden, John, the dog can hang out with you and, "Woof, woof, what's that? Get him, boy, get him."
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd be
I
happy
tell
to
you,
do
I
that.
did, John. I mean, Lily's Bonnie was like 4, 5, 6 months old, and I opened up a tunnel, and she smelled it, and that was the end of it.
Really? So it just natural to her.
The instinct.
Like that's what
The
she
terriers,
did.
yeah, that's what they do. I mean, Jack Russells were bred to go down and catch vermin in tunnels and stuff
Yeah,
along those lines. This is just their instinct.
That's awesome. I did not realize that. Hey, so Paul, let's talk a little bit about the timeline. Now, this isn't something that's being thought of and it might come to fruition one day. It's actually in the works right now, right?
Yeah, it's very aggressive. They're going to break ground on creating this project very soon. Literally any month. I think this fall. The idea is that the space is built and ready for the roses by spring of 2025. So 4, 5, 6 months away.
Okay.
So we'll be able to deliver a good round of roses very early from Autumn and Sons. The ones that are in cultivation that I can get is big 2-year-old bare root plants. Autumn and Sons will put them in 5-gallon pots and grow them on, so they'll show up with a good root ball and everything. And then the second round will be probably later next year. Those are going to be the roses that are smaller. We have to root them from cuttings, get them custom budded, or whatever the case may be. But the idea is that by next summer, this garden should be pretty filled in and rocking.
Yeah, and that's such a neat way to kind of honor some of the California nursery history. Thank you for very, very much for working on this project because it's such a neat
That was
thing.
fun. This is just people always ask me when are you going to retire from what you do? I said, retire from what? I'd be doing it anyway. Just, now they pay me.
Yeah, exactly. And then you learn so much. I mean, like you've done this for many other, public and private groups, but nothing sometimes no project's the same, right? Like as far as like maybe you're trying to do
learning. I mean, you talked about, touring public gardens, when I lead garden tours in England and things along those lines. I mean, one of the things that I am doing actually is I'm looking at the gardens themselves. How is it laid out? How was this done? How is it put together? In many cases, we go through private gardens with the estate, the owner of the estate who created the garden, and that's just a wonderful conversation to have. Why did you do this, and what were you thinking about that? And there's you just soak up all this knowledge like a sponge. I mean, it's great.
I always love that conversation too because sometimes it's the funniest thing where you're like, why did you do that there? And it's like, oh well, a gopher ate that plant, so I just had one of those in the pot, so I thought, why not stick it there? And then next thing you know, that's why this sycamore tree is planted there.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of gardening is accidents. You can plant as much as you want, but you're still gonna end up moving stuff at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the fun. It's a never-ending thing, and that's the joy of it. You're never going to walk away and go, well, that garden's finished now. Not really. It never will be.
That is the truth.
Paul, you just quickly mentioned when you lead garden tours. I wondered if you had a garden tour coming up, and if not right now, how do people find out about going on one of your tours?
Yeah, I do have tours coming up. The best way to find out about it is, again, my website, paulzimmermanroses.com. You can actually get on an email list for just the garden tours, which I don't share. It's my private email list. That's one way to go. I've got two. Yeah, I've got a couple, actually 3. In June of next year, June 8th of 2025, going to England again, which is always a wonderful place to go. And these are small tours. It's like 20, 25 people at most. We have a private motor coach, hotels, meals, everything's dealt with. Basically, you show up at the airport, and when you're done, we drop you at the airport. Or you can certainly stay on longer, whatever you choose to do. But we're going to do some neat things. We're going to Peter Beals Roses, and they're going to spend an entire day there. They're going to do workshops, so we're going to have a lot of fun there. Cotton Court, Hidcote. I mean, just all kinds of wonderful gardens, British pubs. I try to make some quintessential culture as well. So that's in June of next year, doing that one on my own. Then I also team with a gentleman, you probably know John, Michael Marriott.
Sure, from David Austin.
Yeah, Michael worked for David Austin for years and years, and he retired about 2 years ago, and he and I have been friends for a long time. And so this gave us a chance to do some stuff together. We did one last year, but we've got coming in November of next year New Zealand. We're going to do it's 16 days. We're going to do the North Island and the South Island extensively. And again, same situation. No more than about 25 people. And, they're very intimate tours that way. And that gives me time, or Michael and I, if we're doing it together, time to spend with the guests and talk to them and answer questions and give a lot of one-on-one. And then January of 26, we don't quite have that one publicized yet. We're going to do, Michael and I are going to do a tour of India.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, are you sorry, Paul? We're gonna take a quick break. Sorry to cut you off. We get back, we'll wrap up chatting with Paul when we get back.
Yep, and this is a news time for those on Biz Talk Radio, so do stay with us. Going to come back, wrap things up with Paul Zimmerman. Thank you for tuning in. This is Garden America. All right, we are back, and if you're tuned in on Biz Talk Radio, this is hour number 2. Hopefully you heard the first hour. If not, a lot of things still to come here. Hour 2 for Biz Talk Radio. Those on Facebook Live. Going to keep on rolling along. Right now, going to wrap things up with a great guest today. A lot of good information. Paul Zimmerman, Tiger.
Yeah, sorry about that, Paul. We cut you off to be able to kind of.
You got ads.
Yeah,
you got to pay the bills.
But I did post your website link to our Facebook chat. So for people that are looking for information, paulzimmermanroses.com. And, join one of the two.
The website, too, is a contact form, and you can email me. My email's all over the place. So, people can reach out to me that way. Facebook as well. I've got a Facebook group, so.
Perfect.
I'm easy to get a hold of.
All right. Well, let us know when that garden opens up, Paul. And thank you very much for joining us. And I'm glad that you're safe and everything's doing better. Good luck on the recovery over there, okay?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I will let you guys know when the gardening is up. And it's been I have a great time chatting with you guys.
We'll do it again. We'll do it again. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.
We were running out of time with Paul.
Yeah,
but Kevin had a good question, and he's up in Coeur d'Alene, and says, we have amazing wild roses growing in the hills and mountains in Idaho, and I wonder, would they be good for crossbreeding or with cultivated roses?
Yeah, sometimes, right? That's where they come up with some of the...
Well, there has not been a lot of breeding with... There's, I think, 128 species of roses.
Uh-huh.
And most of the breeding is been with a small number of wild roses. So there's a great opportunity because all roses originally were wild, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a great opportunity for doing that. And our buddy Ping Lim, that's been one of his focuses, was bringing in wild rose genetics into modern roses. And Paul mentioned he's going to India. Our good friends from India, Viru and Girija, were working with hybrid gigantea. Hybrid varieties of Rosa gigantea, and that's just not as big as the Kiskate rose, but a giant rose.
Yeah.
And they've been working on taming it, bringing it down into smaller sizes, and because of where it's from, building heat resistance into roses.
Wow.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of opportunities depending on where those roses are from and what characteristics.
Yeah,
they
so
have.
go grab a few, Kevin. Have some fun.
Yeah. But I mean, you're so right, because they're onto something, because sometimes, as Paul mentioned, some of the roses that they're going to be working on, they might not be the most vigorous rose or the most disease resistant rose like we have today. And so it's going to be a challenge for this rose garden, because this specific rose that might have a significance in the history of the California roses might be very susceptible to black spot or rust or other things that maybe have genetically been bred out of this series. But with wild roses, a lot of the vigor, like you're saying, heat's a big thing temperature is a big thing when it comes to plants. So if the plant is native to Idaho,
a certain area,
it's used to it.
And then you can breed that with a rose you really enjoy that is not able to grow in that area. That's how they make these plants, and that's what they do. So would you say that would be something that you could also get from the grafting? Like, could you graft a rose onto a wild rose rootstock and get some of the same benefits, or does it have to be crossbred?
Well, when you graft onto rootstocks, there are characteristics of the rootstock that allow the plant to survive,
right,
may be better. Like Rosa fortuniana is an extremely vigorous rootstock, And that's the only rootstock they can use to grow roses in the South because of nematodes. It's vigorous enough so that it can outgrow nematodes. But if you take a regular rose or a California rose on Dr. Huey rootstock, plant it in Florida, say, it'll be dead in 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it depends.
So it can. Yeah.
You know, maybe, well, and then there's some disadvantages to rootstock too, right? If you live in Minnesota
Oh, well, okay.
and it's budded onto whatever rootstock and
Yeah.
the rose freezes,
Yeah.
the rootstock might grow, but
Grow
not
back.
the rose.
Yeah. Right. Oh man. Yeah, that is a funny thing. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole after the show, though, on that wreath for the Kentucky Derby, because there's got to be probably some story as
I was
far
gonna
as
say,
why
there's a history behind
why
it.
the rose.
When did they start? Why did they start? What was
Yeah.
the origin of that? Yeah, because you just
of
look
the-
at
of
it every
that-
year.
of that wreath.
Well, it's the run for the roses, so they had to use a rose.
Is it?
Yeah,
Is the Kentucky
yeah.
Derby the run for the roses?
Right.
I didn't know that.
But your point's well taken. When did that start? Why did it start? Why is it run for the roses?
Yeah.
What's the history of the roses? All that. Yeah, it's,
and then
you know,
is the Rose Parade, the Rose Bowl, is that? I mean,
Yeah.
Pasadena.
right?
What was in Pasadena at that time?
You know,
was
I'm
it
trying
was it
to-
Weeks? Was it JP? What was there that made it Pasadena's the Rose capital? Come
Well-
on, John, you were there.
Well, no, but,
you were
but
there
the
in
rose,
Glendale.
it goes back over 100 years.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There was
Yeah.
something involved in Pasadena.
Well, Armstrong and Weeks were both in that area.
In that area,
like
that's what I'm
Pomona.
saying. Was that
Right.
the reason why you think it was just a huge ornamental nursery place? And obviously, the Budlia Bowl doesn't sound as good as the Rose Bowl or the the Polygala or
Well, you know what's interesting?
the Boxwood Bowl.
You know, they're all the rose, all the bowl games are sponsored now. But
Right.
back in the day, you had the Rose
Yeah.
Bowl, you had the Orange Bowl, you had the Sugar Bowl, you had,
And it was to the region.
it was indigenous to the region
Yeah.
that represented the game itself.
But now it's
Now it's all different. Exactly. But the Rose Bowl, as far as I know, is there any sponsorships that tag along the Rose
I'm
Bowl?
sure there is, but they still
still
call
the Rose
it.
Bowl,
They still
right?
call it.
Right, exactly.
But I kind of feel like that's.
But why?
But that's not going to be there forever because at some point in time that's going to come down. Don't you
Could
think?
be the Tidy Bowl.
It
I think
could
there
be.
is. I think there
Is
is.
there a
I
tidy
think there
bowl?
is like a bowl game that is in like a toilet bowl.
Well, they have a bowl for losers called the Toilet Bowl. You know that, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I also feel like there's like a
Yeah.
sponsor that's like the Clorox Bowl or something like it.
Brian, Kevin wants to see a demonstration on the art and science of grafting roses at your studio. So
Wow.
I don't even think Tiger and I need to be here for that, but if you could set that up with Kevin,
That's easy.
he'd appreciate
It's very easy to graft. Just make sure you plant the rose above the graft line, not below. I learned that right off the bat. I had a rose that I remember one time a long time ago. It's like it's not dead, but it just doesn't look good. And I sent a pic. John goes, "Well, you got the graft into the ground." And I went, "Oh,
The rose is upside down. Those are the roots.
yeah, exactly."
The bare root. Bare root. You have it planted upside down.
Brian did good with his bare root roses when he planted them. Everybody else has died. but
Yeah,
you-
exactly.
You got two, right? Did both of them
Yeah.
grow? or just
I
one?
had two. One was prolific. The other one died. I realized last week it wasn't going to do well.
Yeah.
It tried its darndest, but it just didn't
It
survive.
was just too late.
I got 1 out of 2. I'm 50%. I'm batting 500.
Lenore wants to know about if we get Idaho wild roses in California. First of all, I want to apologize to Lenore because she sent in a picture of an angel face rose, which I did not take the correct label from the week before, and it says butterfly bush.
Yeah, it's a very unique butterfly bush.
Yeah, but it was a very nice rose, so I want to let our listeners know that. And then, native roses native to Idaho do not grow here,
Yeah.
unless maybe possibly in Northern California. But we do have native California roses, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tiger gave me for Christmas a few years ago Rosa californica.
Yeah. And you were saying that in the Rosa californica, there's a pink, and then there's a real was it unique white, like the white's rare or something like that. I feel like you said something about there's like two colors.
I might have.
Okay.
I might have. There is 2 colors,
Yeah.
but there's also a double form
Oh,
called Rosa californica plana.
plana.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes back to kind of like what we talked about, where they're indigenous to where they have that climate, and an Idaho rose maybe needs a lot more water,
Right.
cooler temperatures, where we couldn't grow it here, but maybe in the northern state or in the mountains it might grow okay.
Okay, break time. Gentlemen,
Okay, fine.
ladies and
gonna-
gentlemen, boys and girls,
Jeez.
gotta
Talk about a
harsh.
rose that I got in Montana.
let's
Guess
do
I'll
that.
wait.
Okay, we're going to take a break. Biz Talk Radio Facebook Live. Stay with us. This is Garden America, having a good time. Hope you are too. All right, here we are back again. Biz Talk Radio, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate Stephanie, her crew, keeping us on the air every week, making sure our podcast is where it should be. And again, many ways to listen to our show, watch our show, Alexa, Spotify, Google, Pandora. We're out there. We're places we don't even know. I stumbled across this one time.
That
I was
happens
hiking.
when you get older,
Yeah,
It's just surprises.
yeah.
It's just like, where am I?
Where am I? Oh, there we are. Look at this. How'd we get here?
We had some family over this week, and there's a new new addition to the family.
All babies are new.
Yeah, exactly. But we were just commenting on how weird it must be to be a baby, because you fall asleep in one place and you're constantly waking up in other places,
Someplace else.
and sometimes you're waking up in other people's arms that you have no clue who they are, or, anything of that sort.
Are you telling me that at your age this doesn't happen to
I was
you?
going to say, then it kind of goes back, right? Because as you get older, doesn't that happen? Don't you just fall asleep and then you wake up and you're like, where am I?
Here's something that's happened to all of us, but it hasn't happened to me recently. Let's say you fall asleep, you take a nap, right?
Yeah.
1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you wake up, and for
think
that
it's the
first
next
few
day?
seconds, you have no idea where you are,
Oh,
no idea what time it is,
yeah.
because you don't remember falling asleep. And you look at the clock; it's like 4 o'clock. You go, "Wow, is it morning? Is it what's going
Yeah.
on?" It takes you a little bit to click in.
I always find that when you do take those afternoon naps, or a lot of times it'll happen to me when I'm sick and I just
Yeah.
crash out, and then I wake up and I think it's the next day,
Right.
and it's still the same day, and then I can't wrap my head around.
And then you think, I'm wide awake. I shouldn't be wide awake right
Yeah.
now. I need to sleep.
I started prior to the break. I was going to mention that on our 50th anniversary, when we took the family to Yellowstone, that when we were in Montana, I collected some seeds that were by a pathway for a wild rose. Obviously, it wasn't blooming because most species roses only bloom once. Not all of them, but most. And so there were just some hips there. So I took the hips, brought them home, planted them, and now I've got about a dozen little seedlings coming
How
up.
fun!
Really?
Yeah, so I'm going to transplant those. I'm kind of interested to see.
To see what happened,
see what
what they
bloom
look like, what they
yeah,
do.
and maybe
So-
be able to identify the species.
So Yellowstone, they get snow,
Hmm.
a lot more water, and what would be maybe some other things that, but they could tolerate the heat, right? Like your heat.
I think
Like,
they
that's
would,
not
they
an
would-
issue,
I don't
right?
think the climate's that much different. They should do well here, right?
Well, we're hot, but we're dry.
yes.
So is that going to be?
So who knows?
Yeah,
We'll see.
we'll see.
Yeah, Carla talks about walking into a room and you're not sure why you went into the room. That happens all the time. Because, here's my theory. You know you have to walk into a room, and yet a dozen thoughts come into your mind. And by the time you get into the room, you forget why you went in there. What am I doing? Why?
Yep, it's the truth.
What? Look at the way John's looking at
He
me.
just forgot what he was going to say.
John walks into here. Sometimes he'll walk in and wonder why he's here.
Yeah.
And I say, it's a show. We're going to do Garden America. And then he's comfortable.
When I walked up today, you guys were both at the front door, and I said, "Did I miss the show?"
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, he thought he was going to get accosted. John
Yeah.
thought it was an intervention.
Yeah. Did I forget to put the time change on the newsletter this week?
When is that? November? When is that time change?
November, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a
little bit more time.
month or so, maybe a little less.
This waking up in the dark is getting to me, though.
I always wake up in the dark.
Well, yeah, you wake up at 2 a.m. or
You know,
whatever.
4 o'clock, 4:30.
Yeah.
I'm trying to sleep to 5. That's my goal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Stay up later. Stop going to bed at
Well,
7.
I am. I have. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's. I just the whole thing just clicked over like,
Yeah.
1 hour, 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Going to
No.
bed at 9 o'clock's no good for you, John.
Last night I was watching Twilight Zone with Shannon, and it was the one. Did you ever see the one where a guy was a used car dealer, and somebody sold him an old car and it was haunted, and it turned out that whoever owned the car had to always tell the truth, which is not good for a used car dealer.
Oh, this sounds really familiar.
But anyway, one of the people who came in to buy a car was Artie Johnson.
Oh, really? A
Yeah.
young Artie Johnson.
And he looked like he was 20, 25 years old.
Yeah, if you watch those old Twilight Zones, a lot of actors got their start, or as they were coming up through Hollywood. Robert Redford's in a few.
We've seen two now that had the
Burgess Meredith. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Reading
with
the
the
books.
glasses breaking. But we saw the professor from Gilligan's Island was in a couple of them.
Russell Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, the reason I was thinking of Artie Johnson was Laugh-In,
Two
right?
Johnsons. Laugh-In, yes.
And on Laugh-In, they always used to have, if so-and-so married so-and-so, would they be? And I just thought if Butterfly McQueen married Reggie Bush, would she be Butterfly Bush?
Yeah, I saw where you're going with that.
Tiger doesn't have any idea who Butterfly McQueen is.
Not a clue.
But you know who Steve McQueen is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not
Is that his
related.
wife?
No,
No?
not
No,
related.
Oh.
no, not just, he's a very famous McQueen.
Butterfly McQueen played Prissy in Gone with the Wind.
Was that his real name, Butterfly? Isn't it a guy?
Her.
Her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gone with the Wind, 1939. Before a lot of
This was, Gone with the Wind, you're not going to have any guys playing a part called Prissy.
There was a lot of, there was big movies in 39. There was The Wizard of Oz, there was Gone with the Wind, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I think another one that were all up for awards. It was a good year for Hollywood.
The Wizard of Oz was well received.
Not at the time.
Right.
Not at the time.
Yeah.
But who wrote it? It was written in the late 1800s. A woman wrote it, right?
Yeah, Frank Baum.
Was that who it was?
Yeah.
What am I thinking of? Gone with the Wind? Who wrote Gone with the Wind?
Oh, that was Margaret Mitchell.
Thank
I thought
you.
you were talking about
Thank you.
Wizard of Oz.
No. I'm talking too many movies at once here. Yes, Margaret Mitchell and then Frank Baum.
You know why she never wrote any other books?
Is this going to be a joke?
No,
a
it's not a
one-liner?
joke. Not a joke. She got run over by a carriage.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, that's sad.
Wizard of Oz or Gone with the Wind?
The Wizard
Which
of
one's-
Oz got
See,
Frank.
was
Yeah.
caught in
Okay,
a
Frank.
tornado.
Yeah, I was going to say. Okay. Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, got
Run over by a
Margaret
carriage.
Mitchell.
Yep. Hey, real quick here before the break, which is in about a minute, Rick wants to know the best time to start pruning roses.
He's in Idaho still,
See,
right?
yeah, Idaho,
Or is he
so-
in Northern California?
No, he's in
Star.
He's
He's
in Star,
Star,
Idaho,
Idaho.
right now. Gina is watching. Maybe she could mention, but my
Yeah.
thought would be in cold climates, like when I lived in Michigan, we never pruned roses until spring.
Right.
And the reason is you get winter dieback if you have a really cold winter.
Yeah.
So you don't want to prune them now, Rick, because you're going to encourage new growth, which is going to freeze.
Right.
And it's more damaging than
Counterproductive.
old growth.
Right. New
Yes.
growth is easier to freeze.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
it is break time.
Yeah,
We have
wait
two
till
more
spring.
segments. Two more segments coming up. Let's keep things rolling right along here. Biz Talk Radio, Facebook Live, Garden America. Thank you for tuning in. We'll take a break. Back after these messages on Biz Talk Radio. Okay, back. We have two more segments. This would be the longer segment of the two upcoming segments, so plenty of time to do whatever we need to do, whether it's Facebook Live or maybe getting something to drink, grab some popcorn, sit down and watch the rest of the show on Facebook. People do that. They get their popcorn and their drink, and
In the morning?
they sit and, well, there's different time zones.
You could watch us on YouTube, right?
Later on this afternoon,
Yeah.
you can watch, and it's edited too. You don't need to watch that little break in between that we take for Biz Talk Radio.
Oh,
Go to our YouTube page, Garden America Radio Show. I haven't said this in a long time, but go ahead and like and subscribe if you feel like it. And you can rewatch the show, pause and rewind and fast forward, whatever you want to do.
I've never subscribed to a YouTube channel.
I'm surprised you haven't found a Rose YouTube channel and subscribed to
Why
it.
would I subscribe? What does it do?
You get notifications. So when the new one's posted, you'll get a notification and a bell and says, "Hey, there's a new episode. In case you're interested, it's up and running now."
Well, it sounds handy.
Yeah, it's good.
Where's your reunion at, Brian?
Mission Bay Yacht Club.
Oh, nice.
I hung out there as a kid back in the '60s, almost every weekend in the summer.
Gina wrote, I do a soft prune because I like to look tidy for the winter and then do a hard prune in the spring. So regarding Rick's question about when to prune roses.
Right. It's not what's best for the rose.
Yeah.
It's
What's best for you?
best for Gina.
Yeah, what looks good.
Again, the aesthetics.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think Gina had mentioned to me that when she moved to Idaho, it was the first time she realized that there were winter features to the garden.
Yeah.
You know, people,
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
you know, like different colors of bark and
I was going to say that's the biggest thing is
yeah,
the dormant stems, and they
Right.
sometimes have a vibrant red or
Right.
a twisted look that
Yeah.
you don't see when it has leaves on it.
right.
Yeah. It's really neat stuff.
Lisa, did I mention this?
I don't know.
It's one of those things like, did I just do this? Anyway, Lisa mentions that she puts her earbuds in and she goes and works in the garden.
There you go,
When
see?
she's listening to the show.
I was going to ask because earlier in the show, I think I can't remember. One of you had mentioned working in the yard, garden. You start doing a job, and how many times? And for you, John, I'm sure it happens very often, where you get out there and you're going like, I'm going to do this one thing, and then this one thing turns into another, and then that other turns into five. And
All the
next thing you
time.
know, you've got like all these things going on, and you're out there daily. So how do you ever write down a plan or like try to keep track of what you're doing
No.
to keep organized, or is it you go to the grocery store hungry every time and you're just going to fill
What
your
do I
grocery
feel like
you're just
eating
going to
right
fill your
now?
grocery cart with whatever you feel at that moment?
Some of what you say is true, but I never start out with I'm going to do this one thing,
Okay.
which I should because I would get more accomplished.
You know what happens to me? I go out and say, I gotta sweep up a little bit, just this corner. No, the whole thing ends up getting swept up, and then I trim, and I spend an hour, and it was supposed to be 15 minutes. And by the way, those clippers you gave me, those shears, those old rusty, the best. That's probably the best tool I have.
Really?
Those things will cut anything. And
Those were Felco's, right?
I guess which
The
was a
red
good,
handle.
a very
Yeah.
good brand.
Yeah.
But if ever there was a commercial for this brand, old, rusty, and yet better than a lot of new ones. I use them all the time. And I cut everything. I cut the neighbor's hair the other day.
That's when the neighbor got the restraining order, right?
You know, if you believe John, I've got 12 different restraining orders going on right now, which means I can't go anywhere.
What was I going to say?
You were talking about how you should walk into the yard
Oh, yeah.
with a plan,
Right.
but you don't.
But I have so many things going on at one time that I'm finding that the most difficult thing for me to remember right now is turning off water.
Turning off.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I may have 2 or 3 areas
on.
going at the same time.
Yeah.
And this isn't the automatic sprinklers, but
Right.
this is, like putting a hose somewhere and
Yeah,
letting
at
it
the
go.
base of your tree. And
Right.
kind of thing.
dangerous.
Do you set alarms, or no, you don't? Like what I'll
Just
do is
when I need
on
to
your
get up
phone.
early and come to the
no,
show.
but what
on
I'll,
Saturday.
on my phone, what
Yep.
I'll do is I'll put water on, but right then and there, I know I have to because so many times I've left that water running so long.
Yeah, and
like
the phone
days.
tells you to turn it off.
Yeah, but I will set an alarm, a timer alarm on my phone, and have it go off. But you don't do that?
I'm 75 years old, and that's the first time that thought ever entered into my head was when you just said it.
But I have to.
I never would have thought of that.
Yeah,
I've made
It's a
so
great
many
idea.
mistakes
Mhm.
where and it's so true because everybody has those plants in their yard that like for instance that citrus tree that's planted in a lawn. Well, it's fine. It's getting water from the grass. When the lawn gets water, it's no big deal. But it's good to go out once a month and
Soak it a
and
little bit.
soak
Soak
that
the roots.
citrus tree, right?
Right.
So I tell people, drag the hose out here, put it at the base. Nothing that's flooding away, but leave it for 6, 7, 8 hours or whatever you think to soak it. But set an alarm because sometimes
It'll be
you
on all
forget to
night.
turn it off. And
You wake up in the middle of the night, and
yes,
you hear the pipes. You hear,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
what is that
What
noise?
is-
What's that
That's
hissing
water
noise?
running? Yeah, Yeah, exactly.
Carla says that when she goes out in the garden, her ADD kicks in.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you just find other things to do. While I'm out here, I might as well do this.
I only really go out with a plan, and then that plan gets expanded upon. But I try to keep my plan real small because I know I'm gonna do more. So like I'll either walk out and I'll be like, I'm watering right now. And then watering turns into a little bit of weeding,
Yep.
and then I see a dead branch and I gotta trim that, and then so and so. But if I walk out there and I'm like, I gotta get this, and this done, that's overwhelming for me.
Hey, you know that? But you gave me that banana tree a few years ago, right? Wasn't that you?
Yeah, it was
The
him.
red one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been through.
That
I
was
had
an
it
ornamental banana.
partial sun, full sun. It died back, and a new one grew. And
Didn't it fall or something, and then
yes,
a new one grew?
Yes, and there was too much water. I'm sure it was a water issue. So I had it in the same place for a long time, and it just looked like, you know how certain plants will grow and just, they're not dead, but they're not doing anything. So HOA Association had to come in, and they're reinforcing the balconies. Okay, so I had to move the plants. So I had to move this underneath the stairs. So it's really not getting any light at all. Maybe diffused light at best. It's taking off. It found a happy place.
Yeah.
This banana tree, it's like, whoa. Well, now you're under the stairs. I got to keep you trimmed. There's not much. You can't grow much higher.
And you can't trim a banana. Meaning, like,
Well,
they
when
grow up, and then that's it.
But then they do lean over and die. But I'm thinking, wow, you look fantastic. But this was only supposed to be temporary.
Yeah.
You never know.
People have to worry, kind of like not worry, but people have to consider those plants that you can't trim.
Yes.
Like agaves or certain succulents like that, where you don't get to just trim those leaves back and keep them out of your pathway. They don't trim well.
They don't trim well. That's exactly
and
right.
like a banana tree, like you can't cut it down and be like, oh, I only want you to get 6 feet tall now, so I'm going to trim you down. That doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised how well it's doing. It's getting no sun. It's like, should I bring you in the house? Would that make you happy? Gosh.
You know what? Those, they like that darker area. Those really beautiful purple foliage.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
Ed says that he sets his garden up by hydrozones for watering, sets the timers to that.
Yeah. Ed Livo?
Yes. Veronica wants to know about repotting plumeria. She has to do it next year. She wants to know how much bigger a pot they could go in and whether she could use Happy Frog potting soil.
All right.
I don't know why not. Mine's planted in Happy Frog.
Is it? I don't think I would use it
or
straight.
Ocean Forest.
Yeah,
Wait a second.
I would mix it with something better draining.
Maybe if you want the pot to be heavy, if it's a tall plumeria, maybe pumice.
Yeah.
Maybe
to make sure there's good drainage.
30% pumice.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about the pot I was going to mention when she asked what size pot, it really for plumerias, I mean, it's about stability.
Yeah.
It's like it could have a small little pot and be a big plant.
Right.
But the biggest thing with plumeria is that you don't want it to fall over,
It'll tip
because
over, yeah.
if it falls over, it breaks. You're losing branches. You're damaging stuff. So when you're planting a plumeria and you're considering the pot, it's more the stability of the plant. And as John mentioned, in order to get some of that stability, you have to have weight. So if you're going to use a plastic pot, you've got to put something in that pot that's going to create some weight to it to have that heavy footprint. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the whole rocks at the bottom, but that will give you weight.
Right.
And then, a well-draining potting soil. Because here's the thing, again, we talk about this often, is people say, oh, well, I don't water that much. I can use a heavyweight potting soil. That's fine. But you have no control over when it rains.
Right.
You have no control over those cloudy days that things don't dry for
We're going to take
week.
a break.
Okay.
But we're going to talk more
On
about
the
this
other side.
on the other side,
Yes.
as they say, as we continue Plumeria talk. Garden America, one more segment coming up. Do stay with us here on Garden America. Okay, we have landed back in the studio, back after the break. And just before the break, to catch you up, Tiger was talking about Plumeria's pots and the various weights and some do's and don'ts. And then Carla has a question as well.
Yeah, so I just want to, reiterate, whenever you're transplanting a plumeria, you think about the stability of the plant first. Make sure that it's a very well-draining soil. So, again, people say, well, I don't water much, but you can't do anything about rain.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do anything about, the cloudy days that the soil just doesn't dry out. So that's why you pick a well-draining soil, is to prevent rot in plumerias, because they do rot pretty easy. So you got to be careful with
They
it.
do. And now she's talking about her leaves are turning yellow, so I assume they should not be fed now. We're getting into winter
Where's
time.
Carla at?
Huntington Beach.
Huntington Beach. Now, remember, we all know this, and some people learned it when we did the remote at Balboa Park. Winter plumeria, no water. No water, winter
Right.
plumeria.
But I would say she still shouldn't be getting temperature change on the leaves yet.
I've got a few
Maybe.
yellow leaves that have fallen off.
Really?
Yeah, but the rest of the plant looks good.
Yeah.
Just a few.
Yeah.
Just, here and there.
Yeah, maybe.
But anyway, the time of year, do you really want to fertilize? anything?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, you just kind of weather it right
Yeah.
now.
Yes.
What I think it really probably had to do with is the hot and the cold that we
The
did
change
have.
of temperatures.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
it's hot again.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you don't want to encourage the growth right now anyways.
Brian says, Lenore says, just to remember,
Yeah,
no,
no leaves, no water.
No
Yeah,
leaves,
that's
no water.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, Lenore,
Is that a Bob Marley song?
No leaves, no water.
Well, it's not often, but he comes up with some big ones.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was
actually.
really good.
Veronica said, so are you talking about 60% cactus mix and 40% happy frog?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 50-50?
Yeah, 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just don't. Yeah, I mean, you if you could be a good waterer, all cactus mix even would be fine. But
Yeah.
50-50, 60-40.
Because you're going to get some of the nutrients the
So-
cactus mix wouldn't normally give you as
I wouldn't
well, right?
I wouldn't even consider nutrient as far as potting soil for plumerias. I would just be, you're supplementing everything they need.
Right.
Meaning I would, people buy Ocean Forest because it has nutrients, like
Right.
you're saying, right?
For
It's
other
a really good potting soil. But I would not consider that for my plumerias, because at the end of the day, I'm supplementing with other fertilizers that I don't want the soil to be a heavy nutrient soil.
That's interesting, because I think maybe I'm trying to remember what kind of soil. I might even have put in Ocean Forest at one time, not thinking about all this.
Yeah.
And it's still doing well,
Yeah.
but it does get heavy and it does retain moisture.
Yeah.
I've noticed that after even during the heat, come out there 5 days later, oh, you're still a little wet, huh? Sorry about that. I'll leave you alone for a while. So that could be it.
Since last December, and I'm pretty sure I'm not exaggerating at all, I've probably bought 300 bags of Happy Frog potting soil.
Since what month? What
Since
month?
last
a year,
December.
pretty much, maybe almost a year.
Yeah,
Well, you're just
That's 5 pallets.
pretty close.
Well, now wait a
You
second.
can get
It's
you
almost-
can get your own shipment.
Maybe let me change that. Maybe 200 bags.
Okay, because I was going to say there's 365 days in a year. That's almost a bag a day.
Yeah, about 200 bags. But during that time, I have 1 bag of Ocean Forest potting soil, and it hasn't been opened.
You can bring it to
You're
me.
just
I'll-
holding it. It's like that nice
I'll
bottle
take
of
it.
wine.
It's the one that Tiger gave us for Christmas.
Oh, you know what?
And the reason I haven't opened it is because I'm saving it for something special.
Yeah, it's like that nice bottle of wine you're
Yeah,
just saving
exactly,
in the
yeah.
back. And
There's nothing better than opening up that bag
uh,
and just the smell and getting your hands in there. It's just if I was a plant, that's what I would want. It's just a good.
We
I
need
just love it.
our listeners to send notes to
Fox
Fox Farms and say, hey, you guys ought to advertise on
Yeah, really.
Garden America radio show. They talk about you all the time.
exactly.
It is
I'm only
good
going to
stuff.
keep buying your product. If
Tanya
you
wants to know
advertise.
what supplements you were talking about for plumeria.
The Grow More hibiscus and tropical plant food was one, I believe. That was one that we talked about before, which was a good one. And I think you used that one on your plumerias that hadn't bloomed, and then they bloomed, right?
Well, not only had they not bloomed, they hadn't leafed out in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the Grow More hibiscus and tropical food. I know that Top Tropicals, Tatiana, they have a fertilizer too that she really recommended as well. Pretty much when it comes to the plumeria, it's usually, we talk organics a lot, which I highly recommend using. But usually it's a lot of water-soluble fertilizers that you use just during the growing time. So whether it is some kind of blooming solute fertilizer or, all-purpose, liquid fertilizer or water-soluble fertilizer, you can't go wrong. But the key with plumerias are like what we talked about. You don't start fertilizing them until after they leaf out. You can continue that cycle all the way through into the fall, and then you stop because you don't want to encourage growth after October, September, that kind of a thing.
By the way, with the heat we had, I told you that I had to cut back all the roses, and I lost about 30. But I'm actually fertilizing now, which isn't required. But if you fertilize in Southern California now, you're going to have a nice bloom, say, first 2 weeks in November.
Yeah.
So and the weather's going to be perfect for the bloom.
Yeah, and the weather will be perfect for the blooms, and then you don't have to worry about anything else for the rest of the year.
Yeah, because we don't get our frost until January, February. So there's still
dormant
months
anyway.
Yeah, there's still months before any of that problem.
That's it, guys.
Done?
You got a minute to say your piece. Minute to go.
All right.
John's got some advice for us for the rest of the week, and that was or is?
I don't know. You said peace, and I started thinking peace porridge hot, peace porridge cold.
See?
Peace porridge in the pot 9 days old.
Have fun at your reunion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
50 years.
It's going to be a good time.
Oh, and congratulations to my brother-in-law got married yesterday. So Joey and Lauren, congratulations.
Really good. And you were in the wedding or there?
I was there. Yeah.
You were there.
I was the officiant.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You do those things on the side, don't
you?
Exactly.
So congratulations, Joey and Lauren.
Excellent. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Biz Talk Radio, we love you guys. Thank you for being there on the radio. Those on Facebook Live, we'd love to see your faces, your comments, your questions. Have a safe rest of your weekend, a safe weekend. We'll do it again next week right here from iHeart Media and Entertainment Studios in San Diego, California. This is Garden America, Brian Main, John Bagnasco, Tiger Palafox. See you next week right here. Take care.